Hello, WindsorStar.com. I'm Claire Brownell. I'm a reporter with the Windsor Star, and I'm here today with Patrick O'Driscoll, who is the president of Hiram Walker. Hello, Mr. O'Driscoll.
Hello there, how are you?
I'm great. So the last time I saw you, you were in town making an exciting announcement about expanding some operations, adding a new bottling line at the Windsor plant. Can you tell me a bit about how that news has been received?
Well, I have to say it's been, I think, received extremely well all round, both in terms of the feedback we've had from our employees at the plant, but I think, generally from the community, it's been seen as some really good news. As we know, things in Windsor over the last few years, there've been a few pieces of bad news, and so I think it's really nice to to hear some good news now and again.
Absolutely. So I looked up your resume on LinkedIn. It seems like you've been working in the alcohol and spirits industry for quite a long time. Can you tell me about how it's changed over time since you started your career?
Yes, well, I have been in the business probably for about 30 years, and some 22 of that with Pernod Ricard. I've worked in many countries around the world, and been in Canada for the last 5 years. So I think there's a number of trends that one could identify that we're seeing. I think in general, but particularly in Western markets, the alcohol beverage market is relatively mature. So we're not seeing a tremendous growth in terms of volume. I think what we're seeing is a trend towards consumers maybe drinking a little bit less, but drinking better products. So trading up, looking for products with really strong quality credentials. So this is a trend which I think is continuing, and it's it feeds into some of the decisions that we've made recently regarding the plant, and changing some of the if you like, the profile of the production capabilities at Windsor.
Well, one thing we've written about quite a bit is the growing popularity in brown spirits and whiskey and rum, and the growing popularity of Canadian Club with Mad Men. Can you tell me a little bit about how that's affected things at Hiram Walker?
Yes, indeed. Well, you're absolutely right. There is definitely what I would call a sort of renaissance of brown spirits, and in particular North American whiskies. We've seen that both in the bourbon market, but and more latterly now we're seeing also some increased interest and demand for Canadian whiskies. I think this is part of a general trend, as I said, to products with real credentials and quality. We're also seeing in the US, I would say, quite a trend towards what I sort of describe as almost craft type products, with very specific production methods and ingredients. And so we're responding to those consumer trends with the launch of products like Lot 40, which was we relaunched from Hiram Walker recently. That was actually voted the Canadian Whiskey of the Year this year, so very high quality product. We have another product which we launched both here in Canada and in the States called Pike Creek, which again is a sort of craft style whiskey using port barrels we use to finalize the maturation. So these are interesting trends. There's also quite a lot of interest, renewed interest in what was at the heart of Canadian whiskey historically, which was rye. And rye sort of fell out of favor a little bit, and that interest is coming back again. And I think that bodes very well for Canadian products, which essentially rye was always at the heart of those products.
Okay, now everybody knows about rye being made at Hiram Walker. What are some products that are bottled there that people might be surprised to learn about?
Well, actually, the the largest volume of any product that we produce is in fact Malibu. So you know you might have a thought that that would be produced on a Caribbean island somewhere, but and in fact the rum itself does come from the Caribbean, but we bring it up to Windsor, and we bottle for the entire North American market. So it's a particularly big brand in the States, as well as here in Canada, and all of the bottling is done in the plant. Then other products. I'm sure you know your readers know well. Polar Ice vodka. It's the third largest vodka brand in Canada. You know, a real true product of Ontario, and doing very well. And then, of course, you know the flagship brand, and people forget about this, that Hiram Walker is actually no longer the Canadian Club producer, which it was historically. Today, the main Canadian whiskey that is distilled and bottled there is Wise's, which has become, in fact, the largest and most popular brand of Canadian whiskey in the Canadian market.
Okay, so something that Windsorites have had some unfortunate reminders of lately is that multinational corporations don't necessarily have to stay here, even if they've been here for a very long time. We've been reminded of that with Chrysler recently, who's been very vocal about saying, we can easily pick up our operations and move somewhere else. We had the Heinz plant close, which luckily it's looking like is going to be rescued by a different company. I'm just wondering why Pernod Ricard decided to, say we're staying here and we're investing money in upgrading this plant. Why Windsor?
Well, I think there's a number of good reasons for that. First of all, it is actually the only distillery that Pernod Ricard owns in North America. So that's at the first instance. Now they own other bottling capabilities, across the continent, and so there are definitely other options. Nevertheless, from a geographic point of view, obviously Windsor has great advantages, being the southernmost part of Canada, very good communication routes into the main markets of the USA, and also into the largest domestic market here, which is Ontario. Secondly, the position of Windsor, is very well situated for the big agricultural capabilities right in the backyard of southern Ontario. So we use a lot of grain, and having a very strong agricultural capability so close is very important. I mean, I think we produce, or we use around about it's 4.2 million bushels of grain. So your readers probably don't have much concept of what that is, because I actually don't either. But for instance, it's the equivalent of about 50 square miles of planted grain would just be used annually at the Hiram Walker facility. And then finally, I think one of the reasons why Pernod Ricard sees as an important plant is the fact that there's a very, very strong workforce there. They're very skilled, and we've had great relationships with them. We've had 37 years of good industrial relations, with our hourly workers. We obviously had to make many changes along the time, but I think we've been able to achieve a great deal of cooperation, and from that point of view, I think it's a very good relationship.
So speaking of that cooperation, you ratified a collective agreement with some Hiram Walker workers in August that involves some concessions from the workers. Basically, back then, the article we wrote then wasn't painting such a rosy picture. There were some people who had lost their jobs after a Canadian Club bottling line went to the U.S. I'm just wondering, what's changed now to that you're expanding operations, adding a bottling line. What is it that sort of changed the outlook here?
Well, I wouldn't say the outlook has changed massively. I mean, I think it would be disingenuous for me not to say that it is a challenging industry. It's very, very competitive. It's quite mature. Operating in the Canadian market produces some challenges for us because it's actually, because of the liquor board, structure, it's actually not a very profitable market for us compared to other countries around the world. So, there continues to be pressure. We've had to be, over a number of years, investing in the plant to make it more productive and efficient. So sometimes that means that we don't need as many physical bodies, if you like, to produce the same thing. So that's just I think the reality of the world of progress, if you like. Now what we're doing with the new investment is, as I said, changing a little bit of the profile of Hiram Walker. This plant was set up almost for a world that was rather different. That had many big brands in it. They needed speed, consistency, and so we have very efficient lines, very expensive to do a lot of changes to them. So what we're putting in is a capability to be more flexible, to be more innovative, to do smaller products with more quality and higher products. And the net effect of that is not necessarily instantaneously, but I think it's going to be a better job profile, employment profile in the future. For the first stage, it's really about protecting our jobs, protecting those jobs that are already in the plant. Our business can be a bit seasonal. Obviously we sell a lot in the holiday period, so there's a lot of build-up of stock ready for that. I think the new business that we'll bring into the plant will smooth things out a little bit. So the jobs that we have, sometimes we do have layoffs and periods of layoffs, and hopefully those will lessen, and we'll be able to give more consistent employment in terms of people employed for 52 weeks of the year. So that's the first stage, and then if we with the new line, our objective is to upweight our innovation. We have a very strong research and development capability in Windsor, and with those new products, and also the ability to be able to maybe attract new business could be from competitors, other companies. We'll be in a better position to potentially attract new business into the plant.
If everything goes well with attracting new businesses, do you project employment going back up to, say, 2008 levels, or would that be too optimistic? Has the outlook just changed too much?
Well, I think to be honest, I think it's very premature to predict what we could or could not do in terms of attracting business. The reality is that we would probably never be going back to those 2008 levels. We had a lot of business, a lot of roles that were were done in-house, and today those are contracted out to companies that are better set up for providing those, supplying those capabilities. And as I said, the world progresses, so we have become more efficient.
Okay. And yeah, again, speaking of efficiency, something else that came up back when we were writing about the negotiations in August is just increased automation at the plant, which is sort of a double-edged sword for workers, where on the one hand it makes the company more efficient and competitive, and when they do well, the workers do well, but on the other hand it may sometimes take away tasks that workers used to perform. I guess, how do you see that changing in the future? Are you doing research and development on increasing even more automation, or what?
I think it is the nature of the business that I would say for particularly for our big volume brands, we'll continue to automate because that ensures that our costs are competitive and that we compete with with other businesses who are as equally as efficient, or sometimes they get ahead of you. So from that point of view, I don't see us taking our foot off the gas in terms of that. Now, having said that, as I said, that some of the other business that we have, it's not about efficiency of getting bottles down a line very, very quickly. It's about producing something that's maybe a little bit more complex, if you like. That may have a few more bells and whistles, and generally that requires more human intervention.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. So sort of a craft trend means more man hours, I guess,
yes.
more labor.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you see the Windsor operation, 10 years from now? I know you said that it's premature to think about this sort of thing, but 5 years, 10 years from now, how would you like to see things change here at the Windsor operation?
Well, I think, my dream, if you like, and I think every CEO or president, needs to have a dream. My dream would be, really that we would be able to develop a very strong new export capability out of Windsor, and that will really rely on the success of Wiser's as a brand, which we've launched in the last 12 months into the USA market. So we've really completely reorganized that brand, the new positioning, a new platform, to be appropriate for some of the trends that we're identifying in that market, and indeed in some other markets around the world as well. So, today the traditional business of Canadian Club, which went to one of our competitors, is no longer produced in Windsor. So my vision is to bring Windsor back to being a very strong centre of Canadian whiskey and Canadian whiskey exporting, and that's all about the Wiser's brand.
Great. Okay, and just one last question that I have to ask you: when you go home at the end of a long day of work, what type of alcohol that we produce at Hiram Walker is your favorite drink to make?
Well, I think I'm almost spoiled for choice, I have to say. But after a particularly stressful, strenuous day, for me, there's nothing better than a Lot 40, which is 100% pot still rye, either on the rocks, or if I'm feeling that I'm going to venture into making a cocktail, a Lot 40 Manhattan really can't be beaten.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Mr. O'Driscoll. It's been a pleasure. Again, I'm Claire Brownell on WindsorStar.com. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. Goodbye.